Well, I went down to the wire, but it's 11:30 deadline to either have the agreements signed and the budget agreed to, or postpone the special session. And about 11:27, staff came in with the signed budget agreement and the signed agreement on the parameters of the session, which we're in the process of copying now and make available very shortly. And I signed my name as well, so they're also preparing the paperwork for me to officially proclaim that the special session of the legislature will commence at 2 p.m. this Friday and will last no longer than one legislative day, meaning it's conclude by 7 a.m. on Saturday, and that it'll be limited to the emergency assistance for the areas affected, northeastern Minnesota and northern Minnesota, also with the Bemidji blowdown. So I'm told it's about a $167 million bill now, so it's about a $28 million reduction on what they started with, and that's just all I'll say is I'm glad it's over, or not over. I'm glad this part of it is over, and the parameters are established for the next part. So we'll go from there. Glad to respond to questions.
So what fell out from your proposal?
I don't have the details. I guess I'm told it's $8 million. Actually, was just taking bonding from previous emergencies that wasn't used and putting that in. So it's probably more along the lines of a $20 million reduction. But I'll let Jamie Tincher, Deputy Chief of Staff, who negotiate all of this, to come up and answer any questions. So why don't you come and use the microphone?
We can get more details and specifics to folks. A lot of it is MnDOT cancellations, so it's projects that they aren't going to be doing. I think that was about $11 million. So there was that. There were a couple of debt service relief that came out. So we can certainly answer specific questions about those details in the spreadsheet.
So are you saying there's no aid lost here? That came from found money? Is that what?
It's projects that were going to happen, but they have been canceled, so that is money that will be transferred from the Department of Transportation toward this. So it's...
The Employment and Economic Development line item, it went from $20 million in your proposal to $15 million in the agreement. Is that the Minnesota Investment Fund, and you agreed to $5 million, about $5 million less than what you initially offered?
Well, yes.
That's correct.
Yes, and I mean, again, I think these are not numbers that I'm this is not my budget. These are not numbers that we conjured up. I mean, this is the extent of the damage as the agencies and other experts were able to define it to this point. And with that one, whereas we found in the past that the previous emergencies, the funding provided for small business recovery was insufficient because the needs were greater than were understood at the time, that we needed a bit of a cushion. We said that, whatever funds are not expended by the end of the fiscal year, next June 30th, would revert back to the general fund. So we were looking for that cushion, and didn't work out that way, so we'll make do with what we have. But this notion that this is my budget or my request versus theirs is just simply not correct. It's I'm trying to respond to the needs that I have been told exist up there, and if they have a different view of it, they're certainly entitled to that. But this is all going to help people or repair the damage that was done, and I just want to be sufficient to the need, and if it's not needed, we won't spend it, and it'll go back to the general fund.
Can you talk about how this is going to be paid for in a little more detail?
Well, essentially from the budget reserve. This is one of the very reasons why we want to build up a budget reserve. And so that's where it will come from, most of it. There's a bit of a surplus at the bottom line from the end of the previous fiscal year, so that will go first, and then the budget reserve. And we'll still have a very comfortable budget reserve for other unexpected events or for the future.
Does some of this include money that will be coming back from FEMA at some point?
This is the state share, and much of this will go for the 25% state and local match. And as the state has done in the past in these situations, we pick up the local share, so it's 25% state and 75% of the federal government. And I don't know what part of this is direct FEMA. Do you know, Aaron? What part of the $167 million is the 25% match?
There's about $25 million found on the DPS line item that is the 25% match for the FEMA funds.
And the rest are things that are not covered?
The rest are things that are non-FEMA eligible. There are some projects, both in MnDOT and DNR, that we will be reimbursed for through FEMA eventually. It's mostly a cash flow issue at this point for those agencies.
And the individual assistance, which was denied by FEMA, where the state then is covering to the tune of about $8.8 million, or something like that, somewhere.
And Governor, that is in this, the $8.8 million for individual assistance.
What's the number for individual assistance? I'm sorry, because I literally haven't seen the agreement came in to 11/27 budget, so I haven't seen it.
The individual assistance is all under the housing line item, so that covers basically what the individual assistance from the federal government would have covered, and then there's some extra funds in there.
How much is that?
There is $12.72 million in that in the housing finance agency for individual assistance.
What about what the individual assistance, what it'll go for, and will all of that be recorded so we can look back on it at a later time and see where all that money went?
I believe that it will be through the Housing Finance Agency. That a portion of the money will go to help people rebuild their homes through low-interest loans to individuals. There's a portion of the bill that is in the Family Homeless Prevention Program that'll help people get into temporary housing while their homes are being rebuilt or while they're looking for permanent housing. There's a small portion that'll go to case management so that and construction management so that we can make sure that the funds are being spent appropriately and efficiently.
Well, we will tell Housing Finance, as with all the agencies, that we are accountable for the proper expenditure, and we'll tell them to expect your call in a couple months.
Well, Governor, are you convinced that the people of Duluth, who you've been saying before you're worried about them not being made whole, will they be made whole with this special session and the FEMA?
Well, according to the needs as we assess them now, I'm made whole. I mean, nobody can make them whole for what the damage is incurred and lost housing, lost businesses. I mean, the concern in the smaller towns that I visited was, that the smaller businesses would just not come back under any circumstances. So, we'll have to see. But it's going to go as far as possible, and it's going to go beyond what FEMA was willing to do with the individual assistance. And, some of these highway repairs, like 210, I was over and saw the first collapse, which is bad enough, first bridge, and there's a whole much longer stretch that was also just totally wiped out. So it's going to be, my uneducated guess, at least a year, if not two, to repair that. And so, making people whole, the loss of revenue for the state park and for the businesses that are, in that vicinity who depend on the traffic to the park. I mean, those things cannot be restored, but we're hopefully going to, provide a safety net that will help people survive this.
Is it correct that some portion of the highway funds will be reimbursed at some later point from the federal government on an 80-20 basis?
I believe that's the case, yes, but they said it takes a couple of years to get reimbursed by the federal government. So, but yes, I believe some of it. And MnDOT, well, if you want somebody to provide information from MnDOT or anywhere else, we'll be glad to arrange that.
A question following up on the use of the reserve. Did you come to an agreement with how that usage will affect paying back the school ship?
Good question. We included, at the request of some of the legislators, a one-time exception to the current law, and that in the next forecast, November, if there are a surplus of funds projected, that will go to repay the schools rather than to replenish the reserve. And what's the estimated amount of that? $45 million. And I would agree with that.
Governor, in terms of how ironclad is this agreement that lawmakers aren't going to take up anything else, whether it's the state employee contracts, constitutional amendments, like some members have suggested?
Well, I think once the session begins, I mean, First Amendment still applies. I think people can talk about whatever subject the Speaker and the Majority Leader, or the President and the Senate, whoever's presiding, permit. I would expect that, but I believe this agreement that the five of us have signed would preclude any amendments to the legislation, taking up any other legislation, or anything that's extraneous to what we've agreed upon.
Do you expect, or does this agreement include any type of committee meetings of the legislature, or do the committees have to accept what you give them?
It doesn't provide for them, but they have held committee hearings, and if they wanted to do so between now and 2 o'clock on Friday, I don't know of anything that would prevent them from doing so.
So the committee could not change
the agreement, right, without the signature of all five of us.
However, Senator Reinert of Duluth just talked to him earlier, and he urged Representative Gauthier not to come on Friday. And Representative Gauthier said this morning he plans to run for re-election. What's your reaction to that, and do you think he should be part of this?
Well, I think it's a terrible decision on his part. I spoke with him Sunday afternoon. I've known him for 20 years or longer, and so I talked to him on Sunday, and he just gotten out of the hospital, and I just expressed my concern as a friend and the like. And I tried to reach him this morning when I heard that he was going to be making this announcement this morning, and left a message for him to please call me, and he hasn't. And I talked to one of his close associates who was going to talk to him shortly thereafter, and expressed to him what I'll say now, which is I think it's a terrible mistake on his part. I think it's just something that it goes beyond the morals of Minnesotans to solicit on Craigslist, sex with a minor, and do it in a public area, publicly owned area, and as a state legislator, and come back, into the parking lot, with his clothes disheveled, and it's not about whether that's a same-sex or a heterosexual act. It's just, it'd be the same if it were same circumstances involving a heterosexual conduct. So I really reject the implication that this is somehow targeting him as I guess now he's acknowledged that a gay man, and which is totally of a different cast from this, and I think that he's invoking Paul Wellstone's name in this. This isn't what Paul fought for. So I guess he has the legal right to continue in office, and let's have to deal with that. But I think it's a very mistaken lack of judgment on his part, lack of the best interests of his constituents, of his party, and his state.
Should he resign from office?
I've been urging him to not say that he would not seek re-election. He's the type. I'm not going to say he should resign. I'm saying he should not seek re-election. Others who have had to, under other circumstances, not sought re-election will remain in their offices until the end of the year. So I think it's parallels what others decided, and I think that's appropriate. And I don't know what the procedure would be if he were to resign now in terms of calling for a special election and doing all that. I don't know. But
he will continue to collect state taxpayer money, be on the state payroll.
Well, he should be doing the job. If he's, the fact that he wasn't able to be here last week for the hearing that was directly related to his constituents, and if he's going to draw a paycheck from the public sector, he should be doing his job and be here on Friday to represent his constituents and advocate on their behalf. And so, the fact that he wasn't so far, it's just one more indication of his inability to perform the responsibilities of the job. So that's a different matter, and that would have to be judged based on the facts. But otherwise, the precedent, at least in these last year and a half, has been a decision not to seek re-election, staying in office till the end of the term, and that's been, I believe, accepted by both sides of the aisle.
Well, Governor, this is beyond the morals of people in Minnesota. Isn't he unfit to serve, as Representative Zeller suggests?
Well, I believe he's unfit to continue to serve beyond this term. As I say, there, it's not an easy distinction to make, but in my mind, that's fits what I consider to be a very serious error in judgment, and one that doesn't serve his constituents well, doesn't serve him well, and to continue to press on. But he, again, I'm going to take the position that he should withdraw from the race and continue to serve to the end of the year, and as long as he's performing his duties as a legislator to represent his constituents, and if he doesn't come to the special session on Friday, I mean, that would be a further indication that he's not capable of doing that, and then have to ask me the question next week.
You're not suggesting that Senator Reinert has that he should not show up to the special session, correct?
I think if he's going to be drawing a public paycheck, he is it's incumbent on him to come down for the special session and perform his duties as for which he's being paid.
Governor, do you intend to campaign for one of the write-in candidates who are going to challenge him on this?
I haven't gotten that far in my assessment. I will not support Representative Gauthier, and I will continue to urge him to realize just how destructive this action would be for himself and for all the work he's done within our DFL party for the last 20 years. He was the congressional district chair for a number of years. He's worked hard, and I understand this is a severe blow to his career aspirations, but he brought it on himself, and he needs to take the responsibility for it, and I hope he comes to be able to do that.
Governor, do the Democrats have any legal options to keep him off the ballot?
I'm not a lawyer, but I don't know. I believe somebody is exploring that, but I'm not aware of any, and I'm not well versed. I do remember that when John Grunseth withdrew from the race just 11 days before the election, the Minnesota Supreme Court ruled that the Republican Party could replace him with to become Governor Carlson. So the Secretary of State says that you can't take his name off and you can't put anybody else's name on in his place. I don't have that expertise, but I am aware of that precedent. So as for the lawyers to figure out.
You said you're a friend of his and have been for a while. How tough is this to see this happen?
Oh, it's awful. I mean, I hate to see it happen. I hate to see any public official in this situation. I think it undermines public confidence in our elected officials. And again, but it's not acceptable behavior. And the House DFL leader Paul Thiessen and Party Chair Ken Martin and I and others have been saying this is not acceptable behavior. It's not up to the standards that we have as a party for our elected officials, for our public leaders. It's not up to what we think is the standard that almost all Minnesotans would subscribe to. And so, the fact is that if we can't legally or otherwise prevent him from doing so, then we can't prevent him from doing so. But I don't condone it, and I think it's a terrible mistake on his part, and I think it's going to be destructive to him and his remaining reputation in his district, is destructive for his constituents, a very difficult campaign, and it's going to be destructive for our party and ultimately for the state.
Any idea how long the session will last, or
limited to one legislative day, so it'll be over by 7 a.m. on Saturday. Well, after what we've gone through the last week, I'm not about to make a prediction how long it's going to take.
Would you expect to be here on Saturday to sign a bill, or is that something?
I'll be here. I'm not going. No, I'm not going anywhere on Saturday. I happen to be going to Duluth on Friday because the plant business situation, not related. I mean, unrelated to the political issues. But, I'm sorry?
Would you expect to act on it immediately? Often you'll review the bills for the allotted time.
Well, I'll ask my staff to review it. They're certainly well familiar with it now, having been involved with many, many hours over the last few days. So, but I'll certainly look at it myself before I sign it. But I hope if it follows the agreement, the budget agreement, and the session agreement, that it'll be something I can sign very quickly.
And why are you going to Duluth, and would you try to meet with Gauthier while you're there?
I don't know. This just all came up. I've had this meeting planned to talk on economic development issues.
Is there an aspect, one or two things in this bill that were talked about at length and took a while to resolve at the table?
Well, I think the economic development part of it, that was certainly discussed. The highway, could any of the projects, if it could either be delayed or in terms of allocating the funding to the next legislative session, or, just that, rebudgeted for the next session, even if the planning and so forth were going to be started now. And so, again, Commissioner Sorrell was part of those meetings. He and his people could explain what they considered to be the drawbacks to that approach, but I gather that there was a bit of that incorporated into it. And so I think when part of the session that I attended, those were the two that had the most discussion. And again, I welcome the legislators exercising their proper prerogative to scrutinize the budget, and if they can find savings, and all the better. And we stressed again, we can have an agreement that those dollars that could be expended for the rest of the biennium and were not would revert back to the general fund. So we had our meeting on July 11th, over a month ago, with the 4 leaders and myself. And these are the issues that have been raised, are appropriate issues that they should have been raised shortly after that time, and so we would have had the time to resolve all this and not go through this the political theatrics of the last week.
Do you expect a request for money next year in the session for the further disaster relief?
I think it depends on the adequacy of what's done here, and if there are additional expenses, then I'll evaluate them, and the legislature can consider them. But they're not going to act till the end of May, I assume, on budget matters. So we're talking about a 9-month delay. So that's why the small business assistance for the recovery, that we argued has to be very timely, and individual assistance also, and hopefully as readily available with the proper oversight to people who are affected as possible. So I think anything that's not made available for emergency business recovery for individual assistance now is probably going to be too late in 9 months, but we'll have to see.
Governor, would you consider this agreement to preclude any kind of floor voting or action on Representative Gauthier's conduct?
My understanding of the agreement is that it precludes any amendment to the agreement, the budget agreement, and there are 2 items that were permissible for floor votes. One was the budget agreement itself, and the other, if necessary, was for technical corrections to that agreement, and that nothing else can be brought up for a vote on the floor.
What that doesn't really come to you, they can't even do. If it's something that's just a legislative action that doesn't come to you as a bill to be signed, they can't do that?
They can't do anything outside of those 2 bills I just mentioned, unless the 4 leaders and I were to sign agreement allowing for something else, and I can't foresee that, but I can't imagine that at this point.
Was Gauthier specifically discussed as not being allowed to bring?
Well, not in the meetings I attended.
Perhaps others.
Was it discussed in others?
It was.
In terms of people saying, once it starts, people have, First Amendment rights to say whatever they want to say on the floor. That's for the Speaker and for the President of the Senate to determine, and I would expect that on that topic and on others. But that's different from offering a motion or another bill or whatever, and that's specifically been ruled out of bounds and was before the Gauthier situation came to light.
Great.
All right. Sorry to ruin your Friday evening, but maybe you can encourage them as I will. Please let's move on. All right, thanks very much.